Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment brought to you by Southeast Termite and Pest Control. The weather is warmer. It's time to head outside and enjoy your yard, your patio. But you got to skeeter-proof it first, folks. Southeast Termite and Pest Control have a brand new mosquito treatment that is more effective on mosquitoes and causes less impact on the good flying insects in your yard. It doesn't hurt them, but it takes out your mosquitoes. It's a cool new system. You can call them this week. Check them out online to get more information about their new mosquito treatment. Southeast Termite and Pest Control. I've used these guys for years. I really believe in them. Just great people, family owned. It's a great company. SoutheastTermite.com. Okay, let me take a look at this graphic here. All right, so what you got here is the easiest path to a title. Look, I get it. Why not just win all 15 games and win the whole thing? Yeah, I'm looking for what would it take if you lose a game, what's the best route for Tennessee to still win? I've got them with a close loss to Georgia, okay? And here's why. If you got a close loss to Georgia, if that's your only loss, then you can miss the SEC championship game. You don't have to even play in Atlanta. You can still get a bid, as Ohio State did last year. They lost to Michigan, still made the playoff. Win 2 playoff games, win the national title at 13-1 as opposed to 15-0. To me, that's easier. If you lost to an A&M or an Alabama from the West, that would mean you'd have to beat Georgia, have to go to Atlanta, you'd have to win down there as well. To me, this would be the easiest, most likely path. I mean, you could lose to Texas San Antonio and still, who knows. But to me, this is the most likely, easy path. Do you guys agree that this is the most likely, easy path? Yay or nay? And whoever wants to go can go.
I agree that it's the easiest path. I will say the problem with it, and we didn't get to see this experiment last year, unfortunately, but we were set up for a pretty interesting debate if Tennessee had not lost to South Carolina and not gotten enough help, where we would have seen whether a second team from the SEC East could have gotten into the playoff without being its division champion. That hadn't really happened much in the playoff era at all, actually, in the playoff era. So Tennessee would have to be the first, so it's not a given that you make it in that scenario, but it was obviously very realistic. So that's the easiest path, but you have to put the asterisk there of it doesn't guarantee that you get in. Say there's
Ohio State last year, they didn't win their division.
Yes.
So
they were the first.
They were the first.
Yeah. So it's happened now, and at least there's precedent for it if you're Tennessee.
Yeah,
but
it's the one time it's happened.
But say there's 2 undefeated teams and then 2 one-loss conference champions, then you put yourself in danger. But that is the most realistic path for sure.
You agree, Vince? Or no?
I think it is, but boy, you can control things more if you win the East. Yeah. And say your one loss is to Alabama, and if it is, it needs to be a close loss also. Because if you lose to someone that's not a big boy, and that's clearly going to be held against you. Yeah. So it would have to be an Alabama loss. And then who knows? Maybe you get LSU in the title game and you won't have the whole rematch thing. So then you're in more control in that scenario. But I think overall the odds are better in your scenario of having them outside of the championship game into the playoffs.
Well, it's the easiest and the honestly you can handle. You hope for, because even if you 15-0, you lose in the SEC championship game, that's still a last loss right before they start. Before that final.
So you'd be 12-1.
Exactly.
Coming out at that point, yeah.
But I would say, yes, the easiest because, you get a chance to skip the SEC championship game. You don't have to go play somebody else. You can kind of start bowl prepping. You can watch the games and get ready to go. I would say, yes, the easiest, but there's a couple in there, man, that Texas A&M, it's hard for me to think they're going to be the exact same football team
I think they're going to be better.
That one scares me a little bit.
I'm sorry, John.
No, I was just going to say there are still tumblers that have to fall in place.
Yeah, right,
I'm saying for our purposes, the tumblers do fall in place. You do get the Ohio State bid that they got last year. So there are, yes, you lose control and this has to fall your way and this has to fall. Agreed. I still think that's easier than trying to go 15-0.
Yeah.
I mean, you haven't had a lot of 15-0s out there.
Right.
The only alternative I could see is maybe you lose to Alabama just because that's on the road instead. And say because you're at home you beat Georgia and you win the SEC East. I could see that because then you might get LSU or someone in the championship game, and on the right day, that's probably a game Tennessee could win. It's not easier because it's a 13th
You're having to play
game,
another game, yeah.
But it's a manageable path too. It allows you more control because a one-loss SEC champion obviously is getting in.
Also, depending on what that one loss is, you may need the SEC championship game to solidify your spot based on who the other candidates are sitting there for the playoff.
Well, again, tumblers are falling into place nice. So I didn't want to get. All right, so here's the question. How realistic is that? And I'm going to give you three choices. It's a real possibility. It's a real possibility. Or don't dismiss it. Or get back on your meds. Where are we going? That's a real possibility. Is it, don't dismiss it, or is it, get back on your meds?
Because we can say get back on your meds so frequently and like for a long time in the struggle years of Tennessee, I don't blame Tennessee fans for going there and thinking about it, and for shows like this to discuss it. So yeah. I'm gonna say don't dismiss it, because at least they're in somewhat range.
Yeah, I say don't dismiss it as well.
That's where I was headed. I actually, we were discussing this sort of related on our podcast this week, and 7-5 is what I said was the floor for this team if things just went off the rails at quarterback. But I think the ceiling's 11-1, and I think it's because of a lot of this stuff. The schedule's manageable. Georgia looks like the only team in the SEC this year that's probably hard to beat on almost any day. There are a lot of things that, even though Tennessee's got some things to figure out, there's no reason to think they can't win those other 11 games if the stars align.
You beat Alabama, that streak is over.
Yeah, I say it's a huge possibility, because you still got to think about there's a lot of quarterbacks that's being replaced in major programs. Alabama, Georgia, and Georgia's got a lot of talent, going to keep a lot of talent, but Stetson Bennett did a lot for him. He made a lot of plays in situations.
Always made the right decision.
Exactly. So I think then you got a lot of offensive coordinators that's coming into different situations. So I say yes, it's definitely a possibility. I would say the biggest thing is I want to see how that offense flows, how our offense flows with Alex Golesh gone. Yeah. That's what I want to see.
It's interesting. That's one thing we didn't really get a chance to talk about, and it's difficult to talk about it because you look back on the '98 coaching staff, and well, you know everything that happened since then. But going into '98, Philip Fulmer still hadn't beaten Florida. All right, and he just won his first SEC title, but he still hadn't beaten Florida. David Cutcliffe had just left. You got Randy Sanders. Nobody knows what that's going to be. Well, actually, no, Cutcliffe was there in '98. He left for the Fiesta Bowl. So Cutcliffe was there. You had a lot of confidence in Cutcliffe. Chavis was still relatively new, and there were a lot of people who didn't like Chavis getting that job when he got it in '95. So by that point, you'd won an SEC title. But the coaching staff then compared to now, I'm not so sure that we're not going to be sitting here in 10 years talking about Heupel as being a Hall of Fame future coach. So the staff thing is an interesting part of this discussion.
There's stability on this year's staff, so that's a positive.
That's true. All right.
To add to that point, I will say there are a lot of people, and Philip Fulmer had an unreal career, but let's face it, he wasn't known for out-scheming opponents a lot of times.
He out-recruited you.
Out-recruited for the most part. Josh Heupel's a guy that's going to have a reputation for out-scheming people, so that could certainly add to what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's true. I would give Heupel a better shot at an upset situation than I would Fulmer's teams. And look, you can win it both ways. I mean, I don't know that Kirby Smart is a genius at this point. I think Kirby Smart's loaded up with the best talent. Nick Saban, I think, to this point, he's done it at multiple places. That means more. Spurrier has done it at multiple places. Heupel's taken this offense everywhere he's gone with it, and he's won with it. So I think that's a good point, that Heupel may have an advantage on Fulmer if we look back at this 10 years from now, but we'll see. All right, very good. Hope you enjoyed that. Mother's Day happy topic. All right, when we come back, if you had to invest in one of the top 5 programs in Tennessee right now, and they're all doing pretty well right now, if you had to invest in just one over the next 10 years, which one would you invest in? We'll discuss that next. Going back on the Sports Source.